Mass formation psychosis is a phrase that has become very popular as of late. This phrase, mass formation psychosis, has been thrown around so much that it is natural to be curious about what it even means. This video is meant to explain mass formation psychosis and how it may apply in the real world today. Just as a quick disclaimer, this video will cover topics closely related to COVID-19. However, it is not meant to promote or affiliate with any political claims. This video is meant to be strictly educational. Mass formation psychosis is a relatively new term. So to begin to understand it, we will look at a term that has existed for a while now, known as mass hysteria. We've all probably heard it mentioned before, but mass hysteria is a sociological term that relates to large groups of people that experience fear or anxiety at the same time. And often this is manifested in odd behaviors. In 1962, in Tanganyika, Africa, there was a schoolgirl who burst out into laughter and couldn't stop. Soon, many other students in the school started laughing as well. This turned into an epidemic of laughter that resulted in the school having to be shut down. This then later spread to the villages that the students were from, and it ended up affecting thousands of people. This behavior was explained as a manifestation of mass hysteria due to the stress that the people of Tanganyika were experiencing. Some of the key elements of mass hysteria highlighted in this example is its capacity to be contagious and also the presence of a stressor. The popularity in the concept of mass formation psychosis is accredited to a Joe Rogan podcast where he interviews a doctor about the COVID-19 vaccine. After this podcast, many people from the far-right spectrum of politics have coined this term to explain what they think is going on with the controversies relating to the pandemic, which is why this term has risen in popularity so much as of late. There are 4 conditions to mass formation psychosis. First, there must be some sort of social isolation in the masses. Secondly, there must be a perceived negative change in lifestyle that is usually used to point out blame. Third, there must be a sort of anxiety or distress in the masses that works to attack rationality. And finally, there must be a solution offered to the public by a figure of authority that is accepted no matter how absurd it may be. Both mass hysteria and mass formation psychosis seem to present society as truly irrational and subject to manipulation. Mass formation psychosis takes many of the ideas involved in mass hysteria, such as high stress and irrational behavior, and then further specifies how society becomes irrational. A scholar by the name of Noam Chomsky claims that this natural irrationality in human beings is used to the advantage of elites in big corporations and government. In his documentary, The Manufacturing of Consent, he explains how people are manipulated to support the interests of elitist groups. He claims that propaganda is the tool used to manufacture consent from the public.
When you talk about manufacturing of consent, whose consent is being manufactured?
We can, to start with, there are 2 different groups. We can get into more detail. But at the first level of approximation, there's 2 targets for propaganda. One is what's sometimes called the political class. There's maybe 20% of the population, which is relatively educated, more or less articulate. They play some kind of role in decision-making. They're supposed to sort of participate in social life, either as managers or cultural managers, like, say, teachers and writers and so on. They're supposed to vote. They're supposed to play some role in the way economic and political and cultural life goes on. Now, their consent is crucial. One group that has to be deeply indoctrinated. Then there's maybe 80% of the population whose main function is to follow orders and not to think, and not to pay attention to anything. And they're the ones who usually pay the cost.
You have probably noticed that mass formation psychosis goes hand in hand with the topic of COVID-19. Many people speculate a lot of conspiracies about COVID-19 around this idea of mass formation psychosis. This is dangerous for two reasons. First, it is dangerous to assume that everybody who disagrees with you is crazy. And secondly, this idea of mass formation psychosis is not unique to just COVID-19. Taking into account the concept of manufactured consent, it may appear obvious that taking advantage of group psychology is not a new concept and had probably been done in several ways for centuries. If you investigate this concept, you could probably see how it applies to war, the stock market, and many other mass events other than pandemics. However, it is still valuable to examine COVID-19 from this perspective because it does provide some interesting correlations. What is most argued for the case of COVID-19 causing mass formation psychosis consists of observations regarding the 4 stages as mentioned before. First, there is the social isolation stage. Many people, especially those on the far right spectrum of politics, see this evident in the lockdowns that have been put in place as a result of the virus. These lockdowns have restricted public life, traveling, and many other social factors to lifestyle that have made people increasingly more socially isolated. Next, there is the perceived negative change in lifestyle. This is observed in the mask mandates, increasing prices, unstable economy, and many other factors of COVID-19 that have made life less comfortable for people. The third stage involves a perpetual anxiety, anger, or fear in the masses that drives irrationality. This is argued as being evident in the fear that many people have regarding fatalities due to the COVID-19 strain, and the abundance of media coverage bringing more worrisome data, statistics, and speculations about the threat of COVID-19. Finally, there is the 4th stage, which involves figures of authority recommending deceiving solutions to the people's problems. People who see COVID-19 from this perspective argue that mask mandates and eventually the COVID-19 vaccines have been false solutions propagated by authorities to deceive the public for their own gain. Now, let me make it clear that I am not telling you this way of seeing COVID-19 is accurate. This video is not meant to be about my opinion. Instead, it is meant to explain a concept that I think is used more than it is understood in the most objective way that I can. Before I end this video, I'd like to go back to how it is dangerous to simply call people who disagree with us as being crazy. I think it's important to remember that just as much as we feel validated and correct in our own opinions and beliefs, so do other people feel about their contradicting opinions and beliefs. Calling other people crazy for what they believe is the easy thing to do, but it is also the least beneficial thing to do. If contrary opinions were explored instead of fought against, not only will people develop stronger arguments for their own beliefs, but they will also be less likely to fall subject to the natural irrationality that exists in all people that leads to things like mass hysteria and other types of group psychology. Mass formation psychosis is a term that can be used to explain a lot of things, both currently and historically. If there's anything that you guys think I might have missed in this video, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I will be reading them. Also, I fully encourage debate in the comments below. Just make sure you guys keep it civil and try to hear each other out. With that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.